Let's talk about vultures. They're not the first animal you'd probably want to feature in a YouTube video. After all, they don't exactly have the cutest faces. But what if they did most of the dirty work behind the scenes? What if they were like some kind of winged janitors? It turns out vultures are actually essential to keeping our planet clean. So let's get to know them better. Hi, I'm your host and this is Miniteerth. Vultures are big birds of prey that mostly eat dead stuff, which makes them super important for both the environment and public health. They're also pretty mysterious. There are about 23 different species of vultures around the world, and though they seem spooky, they're really quite special. First off, they're huge. The biggest species that any encounter has a wingspan of over 10 feet. To put that in perspective, that's almost as tall as Shaquille O'Neal. Second, their heads are weirdly bare. Most of them don't have any feathers on top, which is actually helpful because when they're eating, there's less chance of getting feathers tangled with the blood and guts of their meal. But it does make them look extra sinister. And finally, they have really good senses of sight and smell, which helps them find food from far away. And when they do find something to eat, they quickly call over their vulture buddies so they can feast together. Even though vultures aren't cute, they're really interesting and very important for the environments they live in. That's because they eat dead animals called carrion. Carrion is basically anything from an animal that died a natural death, not from something like traffic or a predator attack. It's not yummy stuff. Often it is covered in insects and parasites, and it might even have dangerous bacteria or viruses inside of it. But for vultures, these meals are no problem at all. Their digestive systems are super strong. They can break down and poop out anthrax, botulism, and rabies. So by cleaning up dead animals, vultures stop those nasty diseases from spreading around. Now, vultures aren't the only scavengers that eat dead animals. But unlike animals like hyenas and foxes, vultures don't kill their own food. They're called obligate scavengers, which means that they absolutely have to eat dead stuff or they will die, and that makes them really important parts of their ecosystems. When vultures eat up all the dead animals around, there's less food for other scavengers, which means that other animals get hungry and might end up having babies that don't make it. And then those animals might try to find new food sources, which means that even more animals get killed. So by removing dead animals from an ecosystem, vultures stop those cycles of death from continuing. In addition to saving their ecosystem, vultures also save us humans money. According to one estimate, vultures in India save over $83 million per year by eating up livestock that otherwise would be too expensive for farmers to get rid of. Not to mention that by eating dead animals, vultures reduce the number of rats and feral dogs around, which means fewer diseases for both people and domestic animals. So we should probably love vultures. But unfortunately, they've got a spooky reputation and that's made them unpopular with people. In stories like the legend of Sleepy Hollow, vultures are greedy, ominous, and downright creepy. And I think it doesn't help that vultures hang out with other scary-looking birds like ravens and black crows. So when they're in a flock, they can seem extra spooky. But honestly, they're just trying to find food. Now, in some cultures, vultures are actually revered instead of reviled. For example, in ancient Egypt, people thought vultures represented protection and motherhood, and they often showed up in artwork depicting the goddess Nekhbit, who protected the Egyptian pharaohs and their tombs. Vultures have also played an important role in Tibetan Buddhism. During sky burials, followers of Tibetan Buddhism leave the body outside in a cave or on a mountaintop for vultures to eat. This is meant to show detachment from earthly things like your body. It's also a way to recycle nutrients back into the ecosystem. But most of the time, vultures don't get to have such a peaceful relationship with people. And that's partly because vultures are really picky eaters. Each vulture species has its favorite foods, and they tend to stick to those. For example, white-backed vultures usually only eat mammals, while Indian vultures prefer to eat birds. And that means that if one type of dead animal starts to dominate an area, vultures specializing in other types of food can struggle to find enough to eat. And that's especially true now that humans have started raising lots of livestock. That's why in places with lots of cows and pigs, vultures often end up being poisoned accidentally after eating discarded meat laced with pesticides or medicines that were given to the livestock. That's what happened in India and Nepal in the early 2000s. Farmers would give their cattle a medicine called diclofenac to treat pain and inflammation. And when the vultures ate the cows after they died, they would get sick with kidney failure and die themselves. Within a few years, vulture populations dropped by more than 99%, and while the drug was eventually outlawed, the damage was already done. Of course, vultures weren't always getting poisoned. Even before the diclofenac disaster, vultures were facing challenges from habitat loss and direct killing. People would often shoot vultures that were seen eating livestock, and power lines would regularly zap them out of the sky. All of this led to worrying declines in vulture populations around the world. Today, the International Union for Conservation of Nature estimates that 60% of vulture species are threatened. But there is hope. Groups like BirdLife International are working to bring vultures back by breeding them in captivity and teaching them how to be vultures. No kidding, because vultures are so particular about what they eat. They need to be fed a special diet of ground-up roadkill, dog food, and other goodies until they're old enough to be released into the wild. And once they're there, they have to learn what foods are safe to eat and how to avoid humans. And while bringing vultures back is important, it's equally important to teach people around the world that vultures are actually friends, not foes. In India, a non-profit group called the Vulture Conservation Foundation has started vulture cafes, which are basically all-you-can-eat buffets for vultures. These cafes are set up in places where people dispose of animal carcasses, and they give vultures a safe, consistent meal. Ultimately, these cafes are part of a larger plan to turn vultures from symbols of death and bad luck to symbols of cleanliness and rebirth. But whether people understand what vultures do or not, one thing is for sure, we need them. They clean up the mess we leave behind and keep our world healthy and safe. So maybe next time you see a vulture, you can think of it as more than just a bird with a bald head, a dark feather, and a haunting silhouette. Think of it as a friend,